I adore historic costumes, and if there's any way to use period things, I try to. My name is Karin Kopischke. I'm the costume designer for A Christmas Carol, the radio play. The play takes place in the 50s in a studio with a live studio audience. I had a lot of fun looking at the 50s and looking to see what they actually wore for the radio plays. They're very different than what we wear today and how people dress today. But the radio players are doing a version of The Christmas Carol, which takes place in 1840 to 1860. So even though they don't change into appropriate costumes, I wanted the costumes to reference the Dickensian era. So I went and looked at the silhouette and the details of 1950s clothing and saw what that had in common with 1840s, 50s, and 60s. The silhouettes for the women are incredibly similar. If you think of the 1950s with the tight bodices and the full circle skirts, in the mid-1800s, the women had very tight bodices and the skirts were very full with crinoline. Especially around Christmas time, the Victorians would have fun with the colors of the season. So you saw a lot of patterns in reds and greens and a lot of stripes. The hair was very similar, up with lots of curls. So that way I could have the women's dresses sort of reflect the mid-Victorian era. For the men, it was more about the formality of the period. And so I had a reference to both periods by putting the men in suits from the 50s, which were very loose with broad shoulders, but were somewhat reminiscent of the suits in the 1800s. Because it's a radio play, the actors are telling the play in one setting on a soundstage in a theater. And so they do not do costume changes. It wouldn't affect the radio audience to have them do any costume changes, and it would only make it confusing and take more time for the live audience. So once they get on the stage, they basically stay in the same costume, and it's up to the actor to really recreate the different characters they play with their voice and their interpretation. However, there are some moments when, if there's a very iconic character, they might put on a hat or they might pick up a prop that would be helpful for the studio audience, even though the radio audience wouldn't necessarily hear it. So at least for me, it's a lot easier because it's one complete realized costume, but it's also a challenge to make that costume interesting and be able to work in telling the entire story. When Jacob first approached me about doing the play, he knew he was going to do this as a repertory holiday show. So every year, it would be the same troupe of actors doing radio plays with different holiday stories. So he wanted me to get together costumes we could use year after year, which meant I had a little more flexibility in really going authentic with the costumes, investing more money and time into what they look like. I knew that I wanted to do a lot of period clothing from the 50s and a lot of details and really explore the characters, the actors in the 50s that were doing these stories. We've been lucky enough to have the same cast come back to do 2 productions. This year, everybody is coming back, but one of our cast members is moving into the director position. I've been able to make the same original costume work, and a lot of work was put into that costume, so it was nice to not have to start from scratch. My favorite part is finding those little details, like period ties from the 40s and 50s are incredible. They're shorter than modern ties. They're usually made of silk. The ties tell a story. They have little scenes going on. So to find holiday ties from the 50s was great fun. I also had a lot of fun. Women wore hats then. They wore gloves. They got dressed to the nines whenever they went out, especially in New York in December in the 50s. So I can do all those wonderful little details, including the kind of quirky, kitschy Christmas corsages that I remember my grandmother would wear still during the 60s and 70s.
This enchanting spectacle continues all through the month. making it America's most wanted Christmas gift. Tickets are selling fast, so call the box office today.
Enjoy the costumes and reminisce at how beautifully we all dressed back in the day.